is something that does not fit inside a news headline, but explains everything that has happened since the weekend. At dawn this morning, Tehran confirmed that Major General Majid Kadhimi is dead. Kadhimi was not a battlefield commander. He was not a naval officer. He was the head of intelligence for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the man responsible for knowing what the other side knows, protecting Iran's secrets, and running the operations that no one ever sees. And now he is gone. The Israeli military carried out a wave of strikes targeting regime infrastructure in Tehran. Multiple airstrikes were reported in residential areas of the capital. And in the middle of all of that, the man who ran Iran's entire intelligence apparatus was killed before breakfast. That is not a headline. That is a methodology. Since February 28th, approximately 40 top Iranian officials have been killed across political, military, intelligence, and security leadership. 40. That number has not been reported with the weight it deserves because the press is counting missiles. The list includes the Supreme Leader himself, the IRGC Commander-in-Chief, the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, the Defense Minister, the Intelligence Minister, the National Security Council Secretary, and the Basij Commander. Read that list again slowly. That is not a strike campaign. That is a systematic dismantling of every institutional node through which a government makes decisions and executes orders. A government runs on information. It runs on people who know where the secrets are, who the sources are, which operations are live, which communications are compromised. When you remove those people faster than they can be replaced, you are not just hurting the institution, you are blinding it. And a blinded government shooting missiles at apartment buildings in Haifa is a very different problem than a government shooting missiles with full situational awareness and coordinated command. The initial stage of the campaign prioritized degrading Iranian air defenses, reportedly striking roughly 200 systems, enabling the U.S. and Israel to establish effective control of the airspace from western Iran to central Tehran within 24 hours. 24 hours. From the Iranian border to the capital, the airspace belonged to Washington and Jerusalem before the first news cycle was finished. That fact has consequences that are still playing out today. Now, here is the thing about Haifa, and I want to be precise about this because the coverage is getting it slightly wrong. 2 people have been pulled from the rubble of a residential building struck by an Iranian ballistic missile. Rescuers are still searching for 2 additional missing residents. The warhead from that missile, estimated to carry several hundred kilograms of explosive material, did not explode on impact. The kinetic energy alone caused several floors of the building to collapse. Read that again. The weapon did not even detonate. The raw physics of a missile hitting a residential building at ballistic speed was enough to kill people and collapse floors without the explosive component doing its job. The Israeli Air Force is investigating the failure to shoot down the missile. Attempts were made. Air defenses failed to knock it down. Here is what that failure tells you. Israel has the most sophisticated layered missile defense architecture ever built. The Arrow system for ballistic missiles coming from Iran. David Sling for medium-range threats. Iron Dome for shorter-range rockets. 3 separate systems, each optimized for a different part of the threat envelope, all running simultaneously. and one missile got through. One missile with a warhead that did not even go off killed people and put a building on the ground. The interceptor question is where this story gets analytically interesting and where the mainstream coverage has been consistently shallow. During the 12-day war in June of 2025, American forces fired somewhere between 100 and 150 THAAD interceptors, each costing an estimated $12.7 million, helping to stop around 500 Iranian missiles. That expenditure reportedly burned through roughly a quarter of the total American THAAD stockpile over the course of that conflict alone. 1/4 gone in 12 days. Then the current war began on February 28th. The stockpiles were not fully replenished. They could not have been. A Washington-based research center calculated that Israel and the U.S. intercepted 273 of 322 Iranian missiles they attempted to stop in the 2025 war, an 85% success rate. 85% sounds reassuring until you do the arithmetic. That means 15% of the missiles they tried to stop got through anyway. And those are the ones they tried to stop. The calculation becomes considerably more complicated when the defense system starts making judgments about which incoming threats are worth an expensive interceptor and which ones might be left to shelters and luck. The Times of Israel reported that the Israeli Air Force will start conserving interceptors. Military officials reportedly said that Iranian cluster bombs are unlikely to cause significant harm if people have taken shelter, and therefore the military may avoid shooting down some of them. That sentence should stop you cold. A military defending its civilian population has begun calculating which category of weapon is expensive enough to intercept and which is not. That is not a failure of will. That is an arithmetic problem with a finite answer. And the arithmetic gets more constrained every day the war continues. Some analysts have speculated that Iran may be deliberately holding back its more advanced missile technologies to use after U.S. and Israeli interceptors are depleted. I do not know whether that is true, but the structure of the question itself tells you something important. The conversation about this war has shifted in 37 days from whether the campaign will succeed to what happens when the defensive math stops working. Those are very different conversations. Now, here is the thing that keeps this from being a pessimistic story, because it is not a pessimistic story. It is a complicated one. By the 10th day of the war, Iranian missile and drone attacks on Israel had dropped by more than 90%. That reduction was credited to effective suppression efforts by U.S. and Israeli missions over Iran. 90% in 10 days. The campaign to degrade Iran's launch capacity worked at a scale that prior assessments had not fully anticipated. The threat from Iran's strategic arsenal is a fraction of what it was on February 28th, and that is a direct result of the operational choices made in the opening phase. Every launcher hit, every production facility struck, every commander eliminated reduces the volume of incoming fire that the defensive systems have to manage. The U.S. began flying B-52 bombers over Iranian territory for the first time during this conflict, indicating confidence of air supremacy over Iran. B-52s are not stealth aircraft. They are large, slow, and unmistakable. You fly them over contested airspace when you own the airspace. That is a data point, not a boast. And today, the man who ran Iran's intelligence apparatus is dead. Here is what the intelligence decapitation achieves that the missile strikes do not. Missiles destroy capacity. Killing intelligence chiefs destroys competence. The difference matters enormously in a situation where Iran is trying to negotiate, trying to manage escalation, and trying to read what the other side will do next. The IRGC described Khademi as a senior figure whose work would continue to influence Iran's intelligence community. That is the language organizations use when they are trying to project continuity while privately absorbing the reality that there is no replacement for someone who spent decades building sources, relationships, and institutional knowledge that does not transfer to the next person who takes the desk. Trump set a new deadline for Tuesday, April 7th: power plants and bridges. The ultimatum is explicit in a way that diplomatic convention has never allowed American presidents to be. And the pattern of this conflict suggests that when Trump sets a deadline with a specific consequence attached, the consequence arrives. Iran has watched that pattern for 37 days. So has everyone else. The US, Iran, and a group of regional mediators are reportedly discussing the terms for a potential 45-day ceasefire that could lead to a permanent end to the war. The chances for a deal are described by sources as slim, but slim is not zero, and slim in the middle of a conflict where the head of Iranian intelligence was killed this morning is a different calculation than slim was last week. There is an economic reality sitting underneath all of this that has not moved since the war began. Brent crude remains above $100 per barrel. Every day the strait stays effectively closed is another day that energy costs compound through the supply chains of every economy on Earth. The pressure to resolve this is not just military. It is financial. It is household. It is the kind of pressure that does not appear on a battlefield map, but shows up in every grocery receipt and utility bill in the developed world. I have spent 4 decades watching how governments behave when they are losing control of their information environment. When the intelligence chief is gone, when the naval commanders are gone, when the people who know which communications are compromised and which operations are blown are no longer there to tell anyone. Governments in that position do not suddenly become more rational. They become more unpredictable. And unpredictable adversaries with remaining missile stocks and a closed strait are the specific combination that produces the outcomes no one planned for. That is the thing about taking out 40 senior leaders in 37 days. The campaign is working by every measurable metric. The question that 40 dead officials raises is not whether the strategy is effective. It is what happens when the institution on the other end runs out of people who know what they are doing. The Haifa building is standing in pieces this morning because one missile got through a shield that cost billions to build. The warhead did not even detonate. The building came down from the physics alone. That is what a degraded but not eliminated adversary looks like. And that is the number that matters today. Not the 40 officials, the one missile.